Hello and welcome back to the Sussex Ontario Election Show. I'm Joe Ragusa, partner here and head of our Ontario Government Relations Group. Once again, we're bringing you our weekly episode on all things Ontario government, Ontario politics, and of course the upcoming Ontario election. We are delighted today to be joined by our special guest, Christine Elliott. Christine, thanks for coming.
Pleasure, thank you.
Yeah, and welcome to Sussex and welcome back to Ontario politics.
Well, thank you. It's great to be back.
After a brief hiatus. So Christine is, as people know, she's the nominated candidate in Newmarket-Aurora for the PC party. Recently contested that party's leadership contest, and is someone that is certainly no stranger to those of us who follow Ontario politics and government closely. And so we want to talk to you a little bit today about your journey back, what you see ahead, not only in the election, but perhaps beyond. And
Sure.
We'll talk a little bit about some of the time that you spent away from politics. So maybe we'll start with that then.
Sure.
So Christine, you were the MPP for Whitby for 9 years?
9 years, that's right. Whitby, Oshawa. Yes.
Whitby, Oshawa. And you took a little break from politics, and so as I've mentioned to you, we have a number of healthcare clients that we help with their objectives. So you were the patient ombudsman for a couple of years.
Yes.
And it's not a role that a lot of people know very much about. So maybe you could just take a little bit of time to share with our viewers what was involved in that role and what you did and what that office tries to accomplish.
Sure. Well, it is a new role. I was set up as the first patient ombudsman, and the role was established to allow patients to make any complaints they had about their care in hospitals, long-term care homes, or home care through the CCAC, now through the LHINs. And so we received several thousand complaints the first year.
Oh.
I think what was really important, though, to me was to make sure that we were able to establish a good working relationship with the healthcare organizations that we were dealing with, so they wouldn't see us always as the adversary, but rather that we were all partners in the same venture, which was to resolve individual complaints, of course, but also to make systemic changes to make our healthcare system stronger. So I spent a lot of time doing that in the first year, as well as meeting with patients individually and patient advocacy groups to make sure that we were all sort of on the same page, I guess. And we were starting to get into other areas when politics called me back.
Beckoned you back.
It did, yes.
Well, that's an interesting role. So do you know, is there a new patient ombudsman since you've come back to politics, or?
No, from what I understand, the person who was my executive director is standing in as patient ombudsman. I don't know when they plan to appoint anyone else. It's probably not going to be until after the election.
That makes sense.
So hopefully we will have some say in that.
Interesting. Well, I'll share with you that when you return to politics, and I'm one of the people that, I look at Twitter fairly regularly because it helps to keep us informed of what's going on. I saw a tweet from you that said, "I'm in."
Yes.
And we all immediately knew what that meant, which was great. And I think your return to politics, your entry into that process, I can tell you that our healthcare clients that we do work for, they were happy about that, and that you served as the health critic for the PC party for a while.
I did, yes.
And you were always very accessible to us, and we had a number of meetings, and you were always willing to listen to what healthcare providers and organizations and professional associations and industry associations had to say. So I think that they were happy that you were back in this business. Now, it's not to say that you're kind of pigeonholed in healthcare. I know you have a lot more to your background, a lawyer, an auditor, and we'll get into some of that in a moment. But I think there was, because of the shortened process that the party had, there wasn't a lot of time for individual candidates to put out kind of, here's my vision, here's my platform. Yes. It was literally done in days. But having said all of that, given your extensive background in healthcare, now I should say we don't have a PC party platform yet that we can discuss, but it's been reported that people like Ruben Devlin are out there getting ideas and having input from people. You certainly have a lot of background in it. So Christine, this year the healthcare budget is just now tipped over $60 billion. in this province. And people that provide health care and people that are on the government side of health care, they use and hear the word no a lot. There just
Yes.
never seems to be enough money in the healthcare system. So from a high level, given your different experiences, what do you think the next government, whoever it may be, after June the 7th, needs to think about, needs to focus on, needs to make a priority in the healthcare space?
Well, you're right. I do have a passion for healthcare, even though I don't have a background in it, but I really enjoyed my time as critic and as patient ombudsman. I have spoken with a lot of people about it, but I think any decisions that we make in healthcare also have to be viewed against our current financial situation, and which I think we'll probably speak about later. So we have to remember that there isn't a lot of money that is available to add to the system. What I think we really need to do is use the money that we have in health right now better than we have been. So there have been many international studies that have said that we're spending a lot of money, but we're not getting the value that we should get for each healthcare dollar that we spend. So I think there's a number of areas that we could look at. One is, I think we need to actually look at mental health and addictions. That is something that we had in our previous platform that I think is really important, because we have a lot of unnecessary visits to emergency departments. We have a lot of young people that are getting caught up in our justice system and in jails and so on, that if we spent a bit more money in mental health programs and services for those young people, we would be able to deter them from getting into trouble with justice and with police and so on, that it would be a better value for money spent. So I think one thing we have to start doing is looking beyond the individual ministerial silos to say it's not just about how much money you put into health, but if you put this much more into health, how much more do you save down the line in some of the other ministries? So I think we need to start getting away from the old school view of government and start looking at it more pragmatically in ways that it's going to help people.
Well, your point's a good one, and I think that sometimes the program managers that are 2 or 3 layers down in the ministry's organizational chart kind of guard their budget jealously.
Yes. Yes.
And maybe are not as motivated if there are savings found elsewhere in the system. And
Well,
that's a problem that I think someone has to fix sooner or later.
Well, I understand that that's a concern, that nobody wants to lose money from their own budgets, but I think if we start looking at how we approach certain problems in government differently, then I don't think you're going to have that sort of a mentality. So, for example, if you had a committee on mental health and addictions, there is one there that exists now, but I think it's deputy ministers that are dealing with it. I think that you need to have a minister who is primarily responsible for any given issue, and then bring the other ministers in so that we see it as a holistic picture and not seen as, well, I'm going to lose this money from my budget or take money from this budget. This is a problem that everyone in government needs to deal with, and hopefully over time you can break down some of those silos.
And there was not too long ago, a few years ago, there was a select committee of the legislature that had one MPP
Yes.
from each party on it that studied mental health a little bit.
Yes.
I think that's a committee that you know something about.
Yes, that was a private member's bill that I brought forward, and the government was good enough to set up select committees on mental health and addictions and another one on developmental services. And it was really a good opportunity for members from all 3 parties to get together, to put aside partisan differences, and to really focus on the problem that needed to be solved. And I think if we could do more select committees in government, and that would really help the people that expect that when we get elected, we're going to do that anyway. And also break down some of the silos that exist amongst the various parties, because you tend to only speak with people in your own party. Liberals do, NDP do, Trillium Party, Green Party, whoever else gets elected. I think it's better to get people together, because then I think it's less likely that once you get to know members from the other party personally, that you're going to be hurling insults at them across the aisle. And things should be a little bit more civil. At least that's the way I would hope that it would work. But with the select committees that I worked on, it did work that way.
And I remember at the time the media coverage when that select committee, I think it was yourself and Kevin Flynn
Yes.
and the New Democrat escapes me right now.
It was Franche-Helena at
Right.
the beginning, yes. And
It was held up as an example of the good work that can be done when people from different parties kind of, okay, let's put aside that stuff, that partisan stuff right now, because this is important and we can do good work here and make a contribution. That was held
Yes.
up at the time as an example of that actually can happen.
it can't happen. It can't happen for everything because there's lots of issues where we fundamentally disagree. And when you get into some of the economic discussions, that would not work.
No.
But there are a lot more topics, I think, than people would realize where select committees can be very helpful.
All right, so at a high level then, we're spending lots per capita on our healthcare system. Maybe we need to manage those funds differently. We need to make some operational sort of adjustments as to how people get treated. From your
Yes.
view, that's kind of the way that we should be at least thinking about going forward?
Yes, and I think one of the ways that we can do that, and which I learned from my last job as patient ombudsman, is to make sure that we center care around the patient. And a lot of people are surprised at that because they think that's the way our healthcare system is structured. It's not really. It's centered more around providers right now. But studies have indicated that if you take it back to what does the patient really need and expect in their care, you can probably eliminate a lot of steps that aren't necessary, and that saves money.
Yeah, and I mean, full disclosure, we work for some organizations that think they have a lot more to contribute. The Ontario Pharmacists Association, for example, that are looking at if their scope of practice were expanded even a little bit, they could take some of the pressure off of doctors' offices and ERs. And, I mean, we did the flu
Yes.
shot in pharmacy program, which I think has led to fewer people getting the flu.
Yes.
So that they're an example of a group that, in their discussion with government, is like, if you let us do this much more in consultation with their regulatory college, then it kind of frees up pressure over here. It creates some capacity elsewhere in the system, and maybe you don't need to go to the emergency room on a Saturday night for something minor because that's the only place that's open.
Yes.
Right, so
Yes.
I think that's a good
agree.
example. And you recall we came to meet with you, with the OPA at the
Yes.
time, and you were very open to that. All right, so politics, patient ombudsman, now you're back. And you're not running in Whitby because
That's right.
after you left, there was a by-election.
Yes.
And your friend Lauren Coe, who's a PCMPP now,
Yes.
won the riding. Now you're running in Newmarket-Aurora. So tell us a little bit about how the people in that riding are receiving you, what their issues are like, I'm assuming you're on a bit of a learning curve. They're getting to know you, you're
Yes.
getting to know them. Tell us how the people are reacting to your candidacy.
They have been extremely warm and welcoming. They're wonderful communities, both Newmarket and Aurora. And I feel very comfortable there too. So during the leadership campaign, people were asking me where I was going to run. And my answer was always that it has to be a place that, first of all, wants me, but also where I feel that I can make a meaningful contribution as an MPP. And so, so far, things are good. The people are very welcoming. But I also see Newmarket-Aurora as being a very similar riding to Whitby-Oshawa in the sense that it came from agricultural roots and then had a large automotive connection, Magna in Newmarket-Aurora, General Motors in Whitby-Oshawa. They are shrinking some of their operations, and so there's a need to take a look at how do you expand the economy with new technology and what's the next step. And so those are the things that I'm used to dealing with. There's a large number of people that commute from Newmarket-Aurora downtown, very similar to Whitby-Oshawa. And there's also a need, as it's such a fast-growing community, to keep up the social services that are necessary. So making sure that healthcare services in particular can meet the needs of a growing population. So those are all issues that I feel very comfortable in dealing with and advocating for, and something that, should I have the honor of being elected there, that I would go to Queen's Park and mention vigorously.
Okay, so you're being well received there, which is great. And I guess the explosive growth, see, people in downtown Toronto, we tend to think of the 905 as this sort of monolithic, it's all the same. So there are some similarities, but every community is unique.
Yes, everyone is different, and Newmarket-Aurora, while it feels very familiar, it's not Whitby-Oshawa, and I have a lot to learn. So I'm getting to meet people who are in government, in businesses, on the main street, just wanting to talk to everyone to find out what their concerns are, to make sure that I can address them and that people will know when they go to vote on June 7th what I stand for and what I can do to help them.
Great. And you've now opened your campaign office, I think, just the other day?
Tomorrow.
Oh, tomorrow.
We're opening it tomorrow. Yes, we're still getting things set up, but we're ready to go. We have
Signs
some
are in.
literature. We've got signs. We're ready to start knocking on doors.
You got your campaign team together and it's all in place?
I do, yes. I have a wonderful campaign team. That's sort of a mixture of people that help me on my leadership and also people from Newmarket-Aurora that know the area well and know where we should be canvassing and what we should be focusing on. So I'm very happy to consult with them and rely on their expertise and knowledge.
So there'll be some local people, and as you mentioned, you've been in politics. When did you first get elected?
2006.
Okay, so you have a bit of a following. That was obvious in the events of the last couple of months. You're well known in the party. I've seen, for example, that you get invited a lot to other candidates to help them launch their campaigns and help them open their offices. So clearly there's people in that party, and I would dare say outside of that party, that hold you in high regard. Are you finding that the demands on your time manageable at this point, since you do have to get elected in Newmarket-Aurora?
It is a very busy time because I do have a lot of work to do in the riding that I'm running in Newmarket-Aurora, but I also want to help the other candidates as much as I can, and a lot of them help me on the leadership campaign, and I want to be able to show a little bit of gratitude to them and help them to the extent that I can. And it's a really wonderful group of people. We have a really diverse team of candidates that reflect the communities that they come from. And they have a lot to offer in terms of their professional expertise, and I really hope that they all get elected. But
Win them all.
I'm not sure that's going to happen, but no, they've got a lot to offer and would form a fantastic government.
All right, and just before we go to break, because we are going to take a quick break, can you share with us, if to the extent that you can, what you're hearing at the doors, what you're hearing from people in Newmarket-Aurora, or even when you go into these other ridings to help other candidates, what's on the public's mind right now?
I hear that people want change. I hear that people are not happy with the direction that the Wynne Liberals have taken. They're very concerned about the spending that's going on, which would be okay. I know the federal government did that in 2008, 2009, but that was to move the economy forward. What I see right now is spending just to get different groups of people to vote for you, and that is financially irresponsible in my view, and we don't have that kind of money. We're in a very deep financial hole right now, and we've got to wake up and start spending money only on the things that are absolute priorities, things that are going to move our economy forward, things that are going to help the people that need help, and that's all we have right now. We can't keep spending money we don't have. We're already spending $12 billion just on interest on money that we've borrowed, $1 billion a month, which is going up day by day. We've got to stop that.
So you're finding that people do have the deficit and the province's finances kind of top of mind when they talk to you? They're concerned about that?
They are, because what they're saying is they keep hearing that there's free childcare and free healthcare provisions, pharmacare for young people. But we all know nothing in life is free, that someone is going to have to pay for it, and it's going to be our children and grandchildren. I have 3 millennials, 27-year-old sons, and I can't bear the thought that they're not going to have the standard of living that we've all been able to enjoy, because they are going to be hampered by the spending decisions that this government's making, and a huge debt that they will never be able to get out from under. And that's, when I speak to people at the doors, that's what they're talking about.
Okay. So we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll talk a little bit more about the province's finances and what Christine's ideas going forward are on those. So stay with us.
For 20 years, Sussex Strategy Group has helped companies and organizations navigate government and bring about successful policy change. Our team of experts understand that it takes more than meetings and phone calls to turn heads and change opinion. It takes insight, strategy, and deep domain knowledge to get things done. In a world that's constantly changing, one thing stays the same: Sussex Strategy Group helps you win. Visit sussex-strategy.com right now and let us help you today. Sussex Strategy Group, 20 years of getting you results.
Looking to take your digital advocacy to the next level? Get in touch with our team at Sussex Adrenaline. Sussex Adrenaline is Canada's most awarded digital public affairs agency. Using our proprietary advocacy platform, Vox, supporters of our clients' campaigns have sent over 1 million letters to their local politicians advocating for change. Let us help you design your next advocacy campaign and get the results you need to win. Sussex Adrenaline, digital that actually gets you results.
Welcome back to the Sussex Ontario Election Show. Again, we're joined by Christine Elliott today, who's generously given us some of her time. So just before the break, we started talking a little bit about the province's finances, and that in fact people are bringing it up at the doors as you're going door to door, on the phone, in your riding, and in others. So I didn't know this about you, but during the leadership, you referenced the fact that you, at one time, were an auditor.
Yes, it was.
Now, if somebody asked me, what's Christine Elliott's background, I would have said she's a lawyer, but it was both.
Yes. That's right.
Okay, so you can be an auditor and a lawyer. So if Ken Dryden could be a goalie and a lawyer, I guess you could be an auditor and a lawyer too.
Why not?
All right, so you talked about at the time, after an election, that you would be leading the charge to do almost a line by line. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but there was certainly the indication was that you're going to kind of go through the province's books and take a look at everything.
Yes.
Presumably to, like, what was your motivation there? To find efficiencies, to look for wrongdoings? What was your...
Well, I think everything. First of all, a value for money audit to see if the programs and services that are on the books are providing value. And I think that people in Ontario would expect that you would get rid of a program if it wasn't providing value. But I think we also need to know what the true state of finances is in Ontario, because there has been a long-standing disagreement between the Auditor General and the government about some of the accounting policies that they've used. And so I think we need to be very careful as progressive conservatives in making election promises, because we don't know the true state of affairs. And we need to have an auditor go in and do that analysis, because nobody likes a government that comes in and says, well, we wanted to do this, but then we found out everything was a lot worse than we thought it was. We don't want to be in that position, so we will say, these are the things we would like to do, but it's all going to be predicated on what an independent auditor is going to find.
So and I think Doug Ford the other day was talking, Doug Ford, who was a guest on the show, and let me put it out there, said the other day that he wants to bring in an outside auditor.
Yes. That
would be, I guess, in addition to whatever work the Auditor General is doing. And it was just the other day. So from my chair, it looks like the relationship between the Liberal government and this Auditor General is toxic and has been for some time. They can't agree on whether or not pension surpluses count when they're doing the province's book. So last year, the government says we balanced and we had a $600 million surplus, and to me it looks like the Auditor General said, well, no, you didn't.
Yes.
This year they said we're going to run a deficit, and it's $6.7 billion, and just the other day the Auditor General came out and said, well, no, it's actually $11.7 billion. Yes. It's almost double what you said it would be, and the government counters with, well, that's because your approach is wrong, and she says, well, your approach is wrong. So if you're a person who's not an auditor, but you're a taxpayer, and you want good government in your province, what do you make of all of this? Like, how do you go about getting to it? Is the answer to bring in an outside auditor that is not in government or is not the Auditor General?
Well, first let me say that I think the Auditor General is doing a fantastic job. And if I had to choose between her view of things and the Liberal government's, I would certainly choose hers, because she is bringing in a truly objective view to the situation. But she can't audit everything in government all at once. And I think it's really important to bring someone in or have someone do an audit of all of the government programs and services and give their opinion about the state of affairs. Because I think people in Ontario are feeling uncomfortable about where things are financially, but they don't really know where to go with it. I think most people would believe the Auditor General. I certainly would. But I think it would give her some help if she had some assistance with someone to come in to take a look at the entire program of services that they offer. So I think that will bolster, at the end, the Auditor General's view of things. But it is a huge concern that she has indicated in her pre-election forecast that next year's deficit is not going to be $6.7 billion, but $11.7 billion because of some of the pension issues and some of the hydro issues that have been dealt with by the government in a different way. But I think if we take a look at where things are going over the next few years, by 2021, our debt, which is now about $313 billion, it seems to go up about $1 billion a week, is going to be close to $400 billion
By 2021?
By 2021. If it'll be under that by 2021, but if the Liberals get into power again, it'll be in their next mandate, it'll hit over $400 billion. And that is frightening. That means that when you take a look at the deficit and debt to GDP ratio, it's going to be at 40.1%, which is the highest in Ontario's history. And that is in a situation where it doesn't need to be now. We've gotten over the worst of the recession. We should be looking at things in a fairly good light in Ontario right now. There's no need for this, but it's just this spending that just goes on and on and on right now, in my view, to get votes. That's not okay.
Yeah, so they're not here, but if the Liberals were here, they would say, yes, we are incurring a deficit, but we're spending money on childcare and pharmacare and mental health and a bunch of things that people have identified as being important. And I think all of the parties do their polling and their focus group testing and their research, and so they certainly, it looks like the Liberals and the New Democrats have concluded, because they're kind of similar with the stuff that they're talking about, that childcare and pharmacare and mental health spending are the sorts of things that people want. I guess your view is those things are important, but let's do what we can afford to do. Is that? I don't want to put words in your mouth.
Well, we want to make sure that the people who really need the help get the help. So if we need more subsidized childcare spaces so that mothers are able to get out to work that wouldn't otherwise be able to afford childcare, of course we want to help with that. Do we want to make sure that people who don't have access to necessary medications can get access? Of course we do. We want to make sure that people who need mental health and addictions treatment get that. But it doesn't have to be for everyone. So that for what's happening with pharmacare, for example, is that insurers are now off the hook for it. It's just being paid for by OHIP. I don't understand why. The problem with that is for young people with certain conditions, under the OHIP system, their situation won't be covered, whereas it would be with insurers, and they won't get access to the new drugs that are on the market that are far more effective than some of the old school brands that are available under the OHIP plan. So it sounds great, but when you look at the details of it, it's not. And so I don't see any reason why the insurers couldn't still be the first line that this would come in if there's no insurance or the insurance doesn't cover it. Those are, I think, smarter decisions that make better use of healthcare dollars in this case to make sure that we can make sure that more people can be covered with the medications they actually need.
So maybe government does last payer instead of first payer on the drug plans?
Yes.
All right, fair enough. And that's something that we may or may not see in a PC platform whenever it comes. I don't know the detail of how detailed it's going to be. Certainly when Doug Ford talked to us here, he made it clear he wasn't a fan of the 80-page People's Guarantee, and that he believes in simplifying things and having more like a 5-point plan and kind of things at a high level. We'll wait and see what comes from your party as we get into the election. So do you think that people now, and you've been elected a long time, are people kind of desensitized to this deficit question? And I'll tell you what I mean. I think it's happened a few times. So when the Dalton McGuinty government got elected in 2003, they came in on the heels of what was supposed to be a balanced budget, and they said, well, no, we found all this. It's actually way worse than we thought it was. And anytime there's a change in government, I think the people who are not in this world almost expect that whoever comes in is going to blame the last group to say, oh, they left a mess here, it's terrible. And as you mentioned earlier, our hands are tied now, we can't do some of the things that we wanted to do. Do you sense that people, the voters out there, the people in the province are a little bit cynical, a little bit, they're almost expecting this stuff? Are they, maybe that sense of disappointment isn't there because, oh, that's what politicians do?
No, I think that people are much smarter than politicians give them credit for, and people see it for what it is. They see that this is a government that's trying to spend their tax dollars to get their vote on programs that we need some of it for the people who need it, but we don't need to have blanket coverage for everybody because that's not a good use of money. We want to make sure that the people who need help get the help, and nobody is going to argue with that. Certainly we would not argue with that. But we have to spend the money wisely because we don't have very much money right now. We are in this deep hole. And I think that the flags that have been raised by the Auditor General are giving people pause to think, to say, the Auditor General isn't just saying this because she doesn't like the Liberals. She is an independent, objective viewer of the state of affairs in Ontario, and she is very concerned. And I think that gives people of Ontario pause for concern as well.
Okay, so let me ask you this, because from where I sit, it's kind of strange dynamics heading into this election. So when we had Doug Ford on, I tell you, I was happy about this because he said this stuff after he was here, and we kind of were the first. So
all right.
So I'm going to put up a big sign. You know, Ontario's open for business again. I'm going to bring prosperity back to this province. Then we had Stephen Del Duca, the Minister of Economic Development and Growth, on this show, and he was rhyming off all the macro numbers. So unemployment is low, and the growth rate of GDP is good, and interest rates are low, and Google's coming here, all this. So it sounds like times are good. And then when we get into the government's narrative about why they are doing some of the things that they're doing, so they've reduced hydro rate, albeit by increasing debt, and we're going to do farm care. It's like the justification is that times are good, but people are hurting, and people need help. And it seems like, again, if you're not in this world, the messages coming out are a bit weird, because if times are good, it's usually the incumbent government that's talking about it, and the leader of the official opposition is saying prosperity's not here. I'm going to bring it back. But the chief economists of the banks, whose emails I get, so times are good. What are we to make of all of this? What are the voters to make of all of this right now? Like what's going on out there in terms of the real world?
Well, I think people are a little bit confused, but they are concerned. They know that what they're hearing from the government is not necessarily as rosy as they would like to show, because we have the Auditor General that's commented on the situation that we have with our deficits and the growing debt. We have a situation with business owners. Everywhere I went during the leadership campaign, I was met with small business owners who were to the point where they wanted to think about going to another jurisdiction. They felt they were literally under attack by this government because of the hydro rates that are still way too high for businesses, because of the provisions with the increase in the minimum wage. We all want an increase in the minimum wage, but it was too sudden and too big an increase for businesses to be able to absorb with a lot of the other increases that were brought in under Bill 148 that changed the Employment Standards Act and so on. And then it's the regulations that this government is bringing into businesses to say, not just these are the boundaries of how you should operate, but telling you actually how to run your business and what you can do and what you can't do. People are just throwing up their hands and saying it's like they don't want any business left in Ontario. And that's a serious concern because that's going to undermine our economy even more if we have people that move to the States where they have some big tax breaks for people, or if people just decide to retire. So we've got a situation where existing business owners are fed up, where young people can't find jobs. They're graduating from colleges and universities with high levels of student debt, and they are still living in their parents' homes and they can't get a job. These are serious concerns that people are feeling. So there's a lot of rumblings out there that things aren't as good as the government's saying, that we've got to get a lot of the fundamentals straight so that businesses can operate, so that young people can find jobs, so that people when they retire can stay retired. We've got a lot of people now who are 65 and older who are having to go back into the workforce because they can't afford to keep up with the cost of living. So there's a lot of things that are not working out there that people are concerned about, and that's why they're saying they want change.
So how important is business confidence, the optimistic entrepreneur that will make that investment or not, depending on, maybe it's not even so much macroeconomic numbers, but kind of a feeling for the environment that they operate in? Is this some of the stuff you're picking up, that people...
They're feeling that things are getting worse. They're not getting better with the Liberals, and that's why they want change. They just want government to set the basic parameters, of course. You have to be environmentally responsible. You'll have to operate your business according to our employment standards laws and so on. But after that, people are saying, let me run my own business. I know how to do it. Government does not know how to run my business.
So there's a little bit of being overly regulated.
Much too overregulated.
Okay. Yeah,
so
no, we certainly heard from some of our clients that the Bill 148, people who don't even have minimum wage employees, but the rest of the stuff, vacation days, sick days, all this sort of prescriptive, here's how thou shalt operate from now on. This is the sort of thing that people are playing back to you as saying, it's really detrimental to my business? Is that?
Yes, and even if you don't have minimum wage employees, even people who are at the next level now are saying, well, minimum wage is now $14 an hour, so I'm making 16, I should make 18. So it just goes up the line. It's becoming much more expensive for everyone.
Right. So your leader indicated that he would not, I think all of you in the leadership contest said might not proceed with the $15 an hour that's due next January.
Yes.
But Doug Ford is talking about taking people that earn up to $30,000, they wouldn't pay any provincial income tax.
Yes.
So there's a recognition that people at that income level do need additional help. It's just a question of how we go about it and I guess who bears the cost.
That's right. It's how do you do it, and I think the idea that Doug has is a good one to give people the relief that they need, because that's an income that's very difficult to live on in the City of Toronto particularly.
Well, you would be familiar with something known as the Working Income Tax Benefit, or WITB.
Yes, yes.
It was named that for a reason. Do you anticipate, I mean, to me it doesn't make a lot of sense that if somebody's earning $1 million a year, that the first $30,000 should be tax-free. You could probably do it as a tax credit system, that if your income is that, then your income taxes would come back to you. Can you imagine a scenario where something like WITB could be implemented provincially? I mean, I think it had a lot of merit. I know it's all a function of what the province can afford. Right. But philosophically, does that sort of work for you? Do you see the merit in that?
I do see the merit in it, but I guess, again, it'll depend on where we are financially and the decisions that are made about the best way to proceed. Those discussions are going on now in terms of policies that we're going to be bringing forward, but we don't have a lot of time. So I understand that Doug wants to simplify the platform. The People's Guarantee was voluminous. And so,
Still smaller than the NDP's platform.
Well,
theirs was
yes.
98 pages.
Yeah, well, I think if people get the key indicators about the direction that you're headed, I think that's the most important thing. So I think the decision is going to be pretty stark for people. Do you want to keep on this spending path that is going to benefit everyone, but not everyone needs those benefits? Or are we going to have to be realistic about what we can spend, because we don't want our children and grandchildren to be saddled with this huge amount of debt? It's hard to even contemplate $400 billion, but it'll prevent them from having the life that we've been able to enjoy. And I think we have to make the financially responsible choice for our children.
Any idea when we might see a PC platform? Likely to be during the writ period, which we all expect will start May 9th.
I would anticipate it will be coming out before that.
Before the
the
writ?
biggest planks, yes.
Okay,
yes.
can we quote you on that?
I'm just expecting. I don't know.
All right, well, listen, that's great. We really do appreciate you taking the time out. I know how busy you are, being in your riding and in other ridings, helping other people out. Thank you so much for sharing your insights with us. It's good to see you back in Ontario politics. I think that the place is better by virtue of you being there. So good luck to you.
Very kind. Thank you very much.
On June the 7th, and thanks again.
Great pleasure.